With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Hanging out again with SJ and again with Tom and Jim, my friends and brothers, in this incredible love story set in the midst of a great battle, right? That's the context that we were talking about last week with orientation, the larger story, to understand that that's how it looks. That's how it is. We are in the greatest of love stories set in the midst of the fiercest battles. And we're going through this series on the core themes of Zoweh, which we call the 4 pillars. And we have tackled our cornerstone, intimacy, oneness, connectedness with God. That's one. And we've explored quite a bit about orientation, which for us is knowing, experiencing who you are, where you are, and the good that God is up to in your life. In this loving relationship of the Father, like you were talking about, Jim, questions, conversation, and moving kind of from an information gathering to a walking with, experiencing, enjoying the presence of God in our lives and what it is that He's after, you know, this image bearer that you and I are. And the work of Jesus, the cross, resurrection, and ascension to bring us back to Himself. He wanted His image bearers back, and so He has ransomed us, right? He has restored us to Himself, taking out of the way the sin problem. But as you said, Tom, last week, and it was so good, that there's some policies I've made along the way.
Right.
You know, I'm free. I am free, but I'm not yet, in some cases, free. I have the ability to get free. This doesn't have to be the truest thing about me. Some arrangement that I've made for my own life, my own protection, my own provision, whatever that looks like. And so we're men on a journey getting better. I believe that's true of you men. I want that to be true of me. And Tom, you were talking about off camera a little bit about, before we step into this 3rd pillar, let's bring our audience forward with some more about orientation. And I wish the mic was on before we got, it always happens that way, man. We have the pre-conversation, the stretching is so good before we start playing.
Sometimes practice shots you take, you know.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, SJ started with sharing the idea that there is an origination point to most of how we feel and think and our personalities and our false self way. So in the deconstruction of that, as we walk with God and as we walk with each other in that process, what I was saying is that I think that it's a powerful, powerful skill set that we learn, because if we really do believe that much of what the good that God's up to in our lives is about healing and training, and a lot of times they look the same. They feel the same. I mean, it's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal sometimes. You're getting healed of something, but in the process, in order for that to be accomplished, we need training in how to do certain things in our lives when stuff comes up. For example, we get offended, you know, our wife says something that lands on a place like, you don't know what you're doing, or you need me to guide you through this one or counsel you on this.
Key component is they don't say it like that, right? They just kind of bring you into question, but what you
interpret it.
Yeah, that's right.
Interpret it.
I mean, listeners, this is really good. These voices, these assaulting voices, these questioning voices. I mean, what you're saying,
there's nuance.
I just want the audience to know that your sweetheart's not saying that per se, but you're hearing and feeling that.
And that happens so often in so many settings with so many different types of people in our lives. Well, what we're learning, what we realize is one of the training elements of the process is learning to let go of some policies. You've got a policy on, I'm going to stay quiet, or I'm not going to initiate intimacy with my wife until she gives me the signal, because what if she says no? Or all the different ways that we've sort of set up our way in a given situation. But to learn, first of all, to see when, and SJ was talking about this off mic as well, this idea of the letting go process is something that none of us find an easy thing to do. And so when we encounter something like that, if we won't let it go, then it's never going to change. So these policies or vows that we've made stay in operation. Well, the letting go, I want to read a little piece from Richard Rohr's Daily Meditation, which I actually was this morning, which was really interesting.
That is interesting.
Kind of timely. I'm just going to read it. He says, authentic spirituality is always on some level or in some way about letting go. In a consumer society, however, we have little training in how to let go of anything. Rather, more is usually considered better. Jesus said, the truth will set you free. Once we truly see what traps us and keeps us from freedom, in other words, this idea of going back to the headwaters, seeing how we react in a certain way or how we feel when this or that happens, once we see what traps us from freedom, we should see the need to let it go. As Meister Eckhart said, the spiritual life is more about subtraction than it is addition. But the freedom Jesus promises involves letting go of our small self, our cultural biases, and even our fear of loss and death. It is letting go of our need to control and manipulate God and others. It's even letting go of our need to know or our need to be right, which we only discover with maturity. So you can see this covers a lot of ground.
Yeah, you may want to push pause and rewind. Listen to that again for just a second, for 3 minutes, because it's true. We know that's true. We've seen it, tasted it, experienced it, and enjoyed the truth and the reality of that.
Yeah. I got sidetracked in my thinking, but what SJ said during the break is this idea of letting go actually allows your heart to open again. Because when we're holding something, whether it's an offense or a frustration or an irritation or an impatience, all the stuff that's the opposite of the fruit of the Spirit, you know, that list of the fruit of the flesh, all of that Paul is talking about in Galatians, it's not going anywhere if we don't let it go.
Yeah.
It's going to stay resident. It has a power. It has life to it in us that gets triggered by certain things. And I really believe this, that what Jesus is saying is when that stuff happens, you know, we can't white knuckle it. That doesn't solve it. That just represses it. But if we will bring it to Jesus, bring it to Christ and let it go or give it to him or ask him for help in letting it go, if it's really powerful and really difficult, which believe me, friends, I know there's some stuff in our lives that seems impossible to let go of. And probably many of us have said, I will never forgive that, or I'll never, ever let go of that. And unfortunately, if we want to be free, we got to get the help and the encouragement and the capacity to be able to do that. Yeah. Because as we start walking out of our old self, the old man and the old ways of living into living newly, think of all that we have to leave behind. It is a plethora of thoughts, ideas, beliefs, fears, attitudes. I mean, we're talking about a very, very large thing to be transformed from who we are or who we've been to God has in mind. That is not a small task.
Yeah. And it should make sense, I think, because you're a big deal, really. The story is extra large, and so is your story. You're made to live large. And so these things that have happened to us can be pretty encumbering. I like how you say, you know, the things that we need to let go of. That implies that you see it.
Yeah.
You can feel the energy of it. It's negative in some way, but what is it is a really, really good question.
Yeah, to name it even.
And there's certain things that, as you were alluding to, you're not holding on to them. There's things that are holding on to you. There's things that the enemy has really done a number through somebody. There's levels of trauma. It's all bad to the soul, to the heart, and the mind. It leaves marks. It leaves scars. It leaves wounded spaces. And so orientation is really the identifying less with that stuff and starting to really be able to identify with the true you, the good. Because the true you doesn't feel that way towards your wife. It doesn't say those things like you mentioned towards your wife. You can kind of take things in stride. It's just a very different way to live and to walk with other people and in alignment with God and his will and his way, as you said on the last episode. So I want to move here to this pillar that we're here to talk about. It's a great setup because what does that look like? When orientation starts, the recovery, the restoration process starts to tip from all the old and the old man and the false self, when there starts to be that tip to starting to live newly, like you said, you start experiencing strength and courage and wisdom.
Freedom.
And therefore, you become a man or woman who's living with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. Why do we know and embrace that that's the way we can live and that we get to live? Is because that's how Jesus lived.
It's important to remember, too, that's an incremental shift.
Thanks for saying that.
It doesn't happen.
Thank you.
You know, if you're listening to that and saying, wow, I am so far away from that guy of living that way. Well, it's a piece at a time. It really doesn't matter where along that journey we are.
And let's go back to the other pillar. You get to walk with God in intimacy, oneness, and connectedness with God for orientation so that you can live with nothing to hide, nothing to prove. It's none of that's weight.
So that you can let go.
Right. So you can let go. That's right. I'll share a story from just a couple weekends ago. I was with a friend of mine, and I was just sharing more of my story. And some of my story includes an agreement that I made somewhere along the way, a vow that I made, that the only one that is going to protect me is me.
Right.
He and I talked through that a little bit further, and in his encouraging way, we were sitting by a fire pit, and he said, we take that agreement and throw it right in the fire right now. And I love him, and I love his heart for me in that, and he just wants me to be free, and he knows I can be. And I had to look at him, and I had to say, I'm really not ready to do that yet. I'm really not ready to take that step. And we went back and forth. He's like, are you sure? Because, we can take care of that right now. And I think the reason I bring that up is living intimately with God, being an oriented man, and wanting to be more and more of a man that has nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. God is revealing these things in me that need to be let go of, policies that need to be broken. And on this journey of nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear, I'm looking at that kind of in the reverse engineering way. I'm thinking, okay, well, where do I hide? Where do I prove? And where do I live in fear? But part of being oriented and learning more and more how this works is to know when I need to let that simmer a little bit longer. I need to let God maybe add a few more ingredients to that pot while it simmers on the back burner, and be awake and alert to when it's time to take it off the stove. I'm in that place with that agreement right now. It really is. I mean, as I'm sharing about it with you now, and I'm remembering sharing with him around it was my friend Joseph, around the fire, the thought of me letting go of the idea that I'm the only one that can protect me is scary as hell.
Yeah.
Because I've operated under that system for at least 40 plus years. So listeners, I share that with you to be vulnerable, but also to just give you encouragement that it's not a presto changeo don't feel discouraged because you think maybe you're the furthest from the guy that has nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear. We're all still allowing God, by pursuing intimacy with him, we're still allowing him into those parts of our hearts that are closed off and trying to let go more and more.
And if it took 30 or 40 years to not only institute these policies, but try to run them in a system, I mean, to have an amendment, to have it shredded, to have it healed or treated with God's help, it's going to take some time. I'm learning how to run now without this 40-pound thing on me. It's going to take a little time to learn how to run, how to move,
and Scott,
how to walk.
You should know that we, your friends, acknowledge and see the softness in you that has come out as a result of this work that you are doing.
I appreciate that.
And really enjoy it. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
So keep it up.
Yeah. Thank you. Some of the best meals have to simmer on the stove a while, right? So it's okay that that's true.
We talked too about this term false self, and someone living out of their false self is hiding something or trying to prove something or is afraid of something often. And I think as men, one of the ways that we do that is by doing things, being really task-oriented, trying to accomplish things, performance orientation, which is the exact opposite, really, of letting go.
Right.
Letting go is...
It's holding on tighter is what you're talking about.
Yeah. Exactly. We had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago with one of our good allies, Chris Hartenstein. And I love the metaphor that he used. He said, when I was living in my false self, he says, those were my older brother days. And by that, he meant the prodigal son story, the older brother,
Right.
which I can really relate to. I don't think I'm the guy that's going to go swim with the hogs and mud, but to judge and be that older brother, those are my false self days too.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Recently, we've enjoyed a relationship with a couple really good men, good kings, good sages in Gary Barkalow and John Eldridge. And I can remember when I was going to get to be with them, I would feel so little, and I would want to say the right thing. I would want to not say something silly or stupid.
Or say something cool, you know. Can I get John to say, wow?
Yeah.
You know?
So, I mean...
I know what you mean. I was that way with you guys at one point, actually.
I mean, but so I'm just being honest about how this can look, how this can feel when, there's something to prove, or at least trying to hide that I don't know, or I'm not good enough to be here. Those things that are whispering. So, Gary's become such a good friend over the years and a board member and part of our team in a lot of ways. So with more engagement with him, that kind of fell off. But recently we did the podcast with John with his new book, Get Your Life Back. And I'm actually on the call and we're talking and I realize I don't feel little. This is great. John's talking. He's talking to me like a brother.
That's good fruit.
Not a little brother. I don't know when, though, Tom, I could say that fell off or wasn't evident and present there.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah. Real quick, one more story this morning. I'm talking to a couple for a couple hours about their marriage. Some stuff's hit the ditch we talked about. And so I'm trying to bring the AAA Zoweh truck and help them out of there. They wanted to know, well, how would this look? Where are you going? Where are you going to take us? And I was trying to just give them cliff notes of, well, there's some things back in your stories, and this is going to take a little while, but we're going to intentionally move that to sail towards this place that I'm learning how to sail, and that's freedom in my own life. And whoever's with me, I want that for them. So I started to talk a little bit about the contracts, the policies, like you said, just the vows and the agreements, not a lot, because they're pretty new to the message. Then I started talking about the vow spirits that often guard these things and want to keep these things and try to make sure that they stay employed in our system. And I hear in my voice, you're overwhelming them. They're not getting this. They have no idea what you're talking about. And I had just established with them, not 30 minutes earlier, like, hey, anything comes up, anything comes up in our conversation, let's just say it matters, okay? Let's just consider that a rule. So if you feel angry, if you feel whatever. And so I hear that and I'm feeling that, hearing it literally. And I say, okay, time out. You remember our rule about it matters? I said, so here's what I'm hearing. And they were like, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means I'm being taunted by some voice that wants to
silence me,
accuse me of, you can't handle this. This is too much. And, Michael's an idiot. That's where they're going to go.
Sure.
Is that, I'm an idiot for trying to help, which is partly what I'm built to do, as you said, Tom. But I could hear them go, oh, we got a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. You heard the lock kind of unlock.
Like, but for them, it was like, that's what you're talking about. In voice. I said, unfortunately, it's part of what we contend with. There's a false self. There's the enemy that wants to work that.
Not
there's
every
the true self,
thought is your own.
There's the Holy Spirit. So there's always a little crowd, moving around. And when I think about nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear, I love what you guys said about, well, that's moving toward a place from something to hide, something to prove, something to fear, and to recognize some of those moments and see, oh my gosh, that's how this game works. That's how this battle is fought. That's how this is played. Those are huge moments and very helpful to the landscape of orientation and intimacy, oneness, connectedness with God, right? If it's not good, then God's not behind it. And
God's not done yet.
And then the question is, okay, God, what is that about? I still hear some of those accusations like I did this morning, but they don't shut me up or they don't make me prove that I do know what I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Instead, you call them into the light.
And say, I'm not doing that.
And you say, no, I'm not buying that. I'm not falling for that. I can see that. That's like, you want to buy some of these cheap steaks out of a freezer in a pickup truck in a parking lot? Yeah, no, probably not. I'm probably not doing that.
The price looks good, but the price I'll pay later doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So
I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. That's good. All right. Well, we're going to take a break here for a second, and we'll come back with more of the Exploring More podcast. We're going to go into a couple of stories from Jim and Tom about nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to fear. We'll be right back. Hey, listeners, SJ here. Just want to tell you about a couple of upcoming events we have. We're doing 2 Heart of a Warrior Encounter weekends this fall. The first one is in Underwood, Indiana, at the Country Lake Retreat Center, Thursday through Sunday, August 20th through the 23rd, 2020. And then the other one is at Young Life Trail West in Buena Vista, Colorado, Thursday through Sunday, October 15th through the 18th, 2020. During these Heart of a Warrior Encounter weekends, we have 3 main objectives. We want to help a man get his heart back, teach him how to fight, and show him where the battles are. Join the squadrons of men who are hungry and thirsty for more. The kingdom needs more men who know what it is to walk deeply with God. Come join us and be one of the men who is seeking and finding more. Visit zoe.org/events for more information. Hey, welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. I'm SJ, and my compatriot here, Michael, had to step out from the rest of this episode. So it's just the 3 of us, you, Jim, me, and Tom. And we're going to talk more about nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear in the time that we have left in this episode. Yeah, we want to hear some stories from you guys and what this looks like in your lives.
You know, as we talk about this process of letting go, of living newly, becoming more of a settled man or woman, it does get more and more nuanced and more subtle as these chunks of our personality or way of doing things start to fall off.
Our false self.
Whether they come off in big chunks or little chunks, it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
But give you a little contrasting story. Probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were in a transition period at Zoweh, and I was on the board at the time, and this strategic plan was developed with a couple of people, and I was completely out of the loop on it. And I remember being either in a meeting of some sort or maybe even a board meeting, and this thing just gets kind of laid out as this is what we're doing. And it hit me so wrong. It offended me. And one of the things I've realized is so many times the intensity of these feelings that come up are way over the top for what's actually going on, and which tells you it's about something else, really.
Right.
It's about something way bigger and way more in our backstory. So anyway, I called Michael up and just, kind of read him the riot act a little bit and then talked through it and ended up letting it go, as we've talked about. You have to. Well, fast forward now 7 years of letting go of some of those emotional places in me that could feel that way, feel like I'm out of the loop, or I don't belong, or I haven't been included, all of those kind of narratives that start running through your head, whether they're enhanced by foul spirits or whether it's just you're telling yourself this story. It doesn't really matter because it has the same effect. But just recently, there's some planning going on for some upcoming events.
Yeah.
And flights being scheduled. And I get this email from you, SJ, about flight information. And I'm like, wait a second. I didn't even know I was going. No one even talked to me about this.
Yeah.
But the beautiful thing was, it was like a 2-second, It didn't offend me. It didn't have anything close to the same effect on me that it did back in my story when I was first learning how to let go of the feelings that were triggered by that event before, just weren't triggered this time.
Right.
And I had this great conversation with Michael. The way I know when something is done inside of me, it really is the energy behind my communication. Because when I'm offended, there's no way of hiding.
Yeah.
No matter what you try to do to say it in a nice way or communicate, the tone and the energy is very easily picked up on by someone. But I had a conversation with Michael, and it was just, for what it's worth, I think we could do better with communication. But it didn't have that sting to it, which would have made Michael defensive or had a breach in our friendship for a season or whatever. And I know that may sound like a very small thing, but the number of those moments we have in a day are quite large. And to be able to feel when I'm starting to close, I'm starting to get offended, I'm starting to get impatient, I'm starting to get irritated by someone's making me wait, or they're not attending to me like they should right now. All that false self, egoic things, I think it's kind of fun to live our lives. It's almost like a challenge. How awake can I be today?
How quickly can I shut down my false self, right?
Yeah.
It's a learning thing. It's a growing thing. It's cool to experience.
I guess what I want to say is it's not even an effort. It's just that push to go a certain place isn't there anymore once that work has been done, once it's been let go enough times, again and again and again. Once we've done that and exercised that muscle, it becomes easier and easier. And that's what the end result of that is, you become more settled and more free, which is what we're all wanting to move into more and more as we walk with God, as we live out our faith. That to me is one of the best, I guess you could say, outcomes of what we're talking about.
It's the fruit.
Yeah.
It really is. It's the fruit. Nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear is the fruit of intimacy, oneness, connectedness with God, and orientation in the larger story.
And then one other quick question, then I'll hand it off to Jim. That can translate into being much kinder to yourself as well.
Yeah, wow.
I had a situation just 2 days ago. I'm a stonemasonry contractor, and we were setting up heights of a block wall and steps that were going to get concrete poured to it. And I'm driving home just in a great mood and everything, and I get a call from one of the guys saying, I don't think this is right. I think it's too low because of where this other contractor had placed the gravel behind it. And immediately your heart sinks, but there would have been a time when I would have beaten myself up so badly for having messed up something. The good news is it was actually right. But I didn't. But it wasn't. But the funny part of it is I went through the whole night. I didn't even talk about it with Pat. I mean, I just let it go. Okay, we're going to have to go in. We're going to have to put forms and raise the whole thing up 4 inches, which would have been expensive. But then I'm in prayer time the next morning, and I'm starting to go through it again in my head, because in the morning I'm at my best. By 5 o'clock at night, I'm toast.
I'm with
mentally.
You, man. I'm with you.
So, but I'm like sharp as a tack at 5:30, 6 in the morning, and I started thinking, I said, wait a second. No, it's right. I know it's right. But the point of my story, though, is not that I'm right or that I did it right, but that I didn't go into that place of self-reproach, which I would have. A few years back, it would have ruined my whole night.
Yeah.
So being kind to ourselves is part of the fruit of this as well.
No doubt. Right. So Jim, before you share what you've got, I just had a question for you, Tom. The analogy I'm thinking of is when you can see a 90+ mile an hour fastball in the major leagues and actually make contact with the ball, there are thousands and thousands of pitches that you took before that pitch at that level, right? That enabled you to then swing at that 90+ mile an hour fastball and make contact. So to me, the stories that you just shared, that's some high level oriented living. So what would be for the guy who's maybe just, like you referred to in the earlier part of the podcast, I'm listening to this, nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear. I'm so far away from that. I'm so new to this. Is there a AAA league like indicator? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, is there a way that they can see it or start to see it when the ball is a little bit slower and easier to pitch?
If you are connected to God, He will help you to see it if you ask Him. Another part might be friends. A friend who could say, hey, Jim, you're kind of bossy when you're driving that golf cart. An old story.
Right. We talk about that. It's the, hey, Jim, can I talk to you about something?
Yeah.
Right. So, having friends around you that you give permission to, to say, boy, your reaction to not being in the loop on that seemed a little intense. What was that all about?
Well, I think one of the dashboard indicators, that
that's a great way of
we can use is your feelings, because it's almost like we can develop this inner taste when something gets really nasty or unkind or harsh, whether it's towards someone else or toward ourselves. That should get our antennas up. That really should be a great time to pause and ask that question. Like Jim was saying, what is this?
And it might even be external. I mean,
Yeah.
it might come out of you uncontrollably, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it happens to me a lot of the times behind the wheel of a car.
Yes.
Those things come out of me uncontrollably. Yeah, or whatever. I mean, what do you even have directionals in your car for? You don't use them ever, I mean, just little stuff like that, though. But that's a great indicator. Yeah. Yeah. And the feeling, too, I think. A lot of people can relate to that.
Well, I've heard it this way, our minds can justify anything. If you go to your mind to ask about it, it's going to come up with a great reason and a great excuse. But if you feel slimy,
right,
and that's not where you want to live, and that's a place that we all want to learn how to move out of as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Not in a repressive way, but a letting go way. I mean, learning to let that yucky feeling, let it go. And maybe more than once. I mean, it's even about the same scenario. It can keep coming up, but keep letting go. I think that is one of the greatest things we can do, to learn to do as often as we need to get free of some of the stuff that's still in us, that gets triggered by life. Sometimes that's the good that God's up to.
Yeah. And they're
helping to trigger something.
And it sounds so simple, letting go. It sounds so simple, but it's so
just
hard.
Drop it. Just put it it is so hard. Yeah, I think too I think it was an encouragement and an admonishment all at the same time that JB, our friend, shared at the weekend a few years ago, where he just said, how free do you want to be?
Yeah.
You know what's great about Jesus and his loving kindness and his compassion is he'll wait.
Right.
He'll wait until you're ready.
Yeah.
And it's also great. There's always more.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Amen.
No doubt. So Jim, you got more that you wanted to share about?
Oh boy.
Nothing to hide, nothing. I see a bunch of notes over there.
What I've learned about, or what I'm learning about my false self, as I said earlier, the reason I hide and try to prove, the way that I cover that up is the doing thing. And to be a kind of a jack of all trades, know a little bit about everything, be a decent at sports, know the sports statistics, be able to have a nice car, be able to date the best girls or have the best kids, all that doing stuff. I think why I relied on that was as a basic fear that I had growing up. And I'm not quite sure where it came from still, but that deep down inside, under the surface level, I didn't have much to offer. And I didn't want people to ask me those deeper questions or to probe into my heart. So I just wanted to be really good at a lot of things on the surface so that I wouldn't get penetrated. Nobody would see that I didn't have anything to offer.
Wow.
And so I did a lot of doing and hiding and proving through the doing so that I could hide that fear.
Wow.
That's everybody's story, though.
It really is. It really is. That's exactly what I was thinking, Tom, is that certainly not to diminish anything that you're sharing, Jim, because that's a incredible journey that you've been on. And as you would say, are still on. But you're right, Tom, it's everybody's story. I mean,
I can totally relate.
All of us, I think, in some measure, do that. We don't initially want to be known for the bad things or the things that we have agreed are bad, right? It's not that you don't have much to offer. Somewhere along the line, though, you agreed that that was true with whoever said that to you.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But whatever it is for any one of us listeners, there's something in there that needs to be undone. There's something in there that needs to be let go of. As Tom was talking about, we've all been talking about throughout this whole episode. It's beginning the journey somewhere, taking a first step. Even just saying to Jesus, I have this picture of Jesus multiple times standing next to someone who's either laying on a mat or laying on the side of the road, and him just saying, what is it you want of me? It's okay to say, because I've said this before, I'm sure you guys have too, it's okay to just say, Jesus, I don't even know what I want. I just need to be with you. And so what does that lead us back to? Intimacy, oneness, and connectedness with God.
Amen.
So
I would say this, Jim, because I've known you a lot of years. A big part of the good that God's been up to in your life is He has been showing you that there really is something deep in there to offer that you didn't know was there. And as you have worked with men and as you have poured your heart out for other men and for the allies and all the things that you have really put your shoulder to. The beautiful thing God will do is he'll give you feedback from other people to let you know that it's not true. I'm not so sure you live under that anymore. I think you've made a massive transition, because that was one of the things that you shared with us back at the very, very first event we did. I'll never forget it. And at the time, I didn't know you that well, but I do now, and I know it's not true.
Yeah.
And all your friends do, and all your colleagues, the people that you deal with day in and day out would say, wow, who told you that?
Right, exactly. I mean, and if you were trying to say earlier that is still true for you, then I misunderstood what you were saying. I don't
think he's saying
true.
that. I think he's just being honest about where he's come from.
Right.
Yeah, that's not true at all. You know what's so cool, too? One of the other things, listeners, that Jim really wrangles for us here at Zoweh is the medics at our weekends. One of the absolute cornerstones of the training that we bring our medics through is that you're there to listen.
Explain what the medic role is.
Yeah. So at our weekends, there's opportunities to sit down with someone that will listen to your story really at a deeper level and bring a measure of orientation. Medics are guys that have been to multiple weekends and who are vetted for the work that they've done spiritually and emotionally. So they really just will sit and listen to you share about what God is bringing up at the weekends. Not offer advice, not offer counsel, not offer a repair or fix to your situation, but just listen and be with you, right? And share some empathy. And so, Jim, as you're sharing about how you struggle with not having something deep to offer, you are the leader of that group of men who aren't trying to offer anything other than their presence and a listening ear. And that is one of the greatest things that we can offer another person. It
truly is. Yeah.
And so your ability to lead that group of men, and really you've developed that and brought that to a whole another level in concept from its beginnings. I mean, you've done a great, great job with that. So that's one of the things that I would say you absolutely, that deeper thing you had to offer, that was one of them. No question.
The amazing thing is, maybe this is for some listener there, but the first time I remember hearing somebody tell me that I did have something to offer was at that conference that you're talking about. So I spent 50 years of my life not hearing that. Maybe somebody told me, but I never heard it.
You never believed it.
I didn't hear it until 2006.
Yeah.
And which is sad, but I guess maybe it's proof that it's never too late. I don't know.
It is.
It's absolutely proof of that. It's absolutely proof of that. Well, guys, thank you so much for being with us for these few episodes. We've got one more to go. We're going to talk about more love, more life, and more freedom. That's our fourth pillar.
All right.
And more of the fruit that's available to us. So we're excited about that coming up. Listeners, if you've got comments or questions for us, shoot us an email at exploringmore@zoweh.org. If you'd leave us a rate and review and share on your podcast platform of choice, we'd appreciate that. Would help us out immensely. Thanks to Brooke and Serena, who work so hard to make us sound good. And thank you, Jim and Tom, for being in the studio with us today.
Yeah, I love being here.
Yeah, love having you. Listeners, we'll see you next time.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.